me check. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And today I'll be talking on how to transform classrooms and laboratories into innovation centers. So this is a very interesting topic, and let me quickly start by sharing a small innovation that I did yesterday. So I was having some trouble operating my laptop because it was getting kind of heated up, and it's not a probably this is not the ideal time to take it outside for repairs, because then I have to keep it in a store for 4 days, and then during this pandemic I'm not sure how to handle that kind of a tricky situation because of the coronavirus infection and all those things, ongoing pandemic. So then what I thought is, instead of using my laptop, why don't I use my cell phone? So then what I did is I went to Canva, made the entire presentation in Canva, downloaded it as a video, and I'm presenting it from my cell phone right now. So not exactly an innovation, but kind of an innovative idea, just like how to overcome hurdles. Just wanted to share a quick example. All right, so let's get started. uh, my first slide is on takeaways. So, what are the takeaways from today's session? What will be the takeaways? So, what is basically classroom innovation? What exactly do we mean by classroom innovation? And then, what is laboratory innovation? Why do we need to innovate to begin with? This is a very critical question, very important question. I also define what is innovation, and I'm sure all of you know what research and innovation is. So I'll not emphasize a lot on that, but I'll mostly emphasize on how to bring in innovation, how to motivate students and researchers to innovate on a continual basis. Then how do we create environments that are conducive for innovation? This is very important because merely having the desire to innovate does not help. You also need a conducive environment. And as instructors and teachers, it is our job to create and provide nurturing environments for all the students and researchers and everybody. Then why do people fail to innovate? I'll touch upon that as well. There are a few clearly identified reasons because of which people do not end up innovating new things. Then as we go along, I'll also share some special tips on how to create a culture of innovation, how to nurture the ambition to innovate and create, and how to foster innovation basically. We could be anyone. We could play the role of an administrator, we could be a teacher, we could be a professor, we could be a student, we could be any, or we could be from the HR, maybe from the placement cell. And if your university or institute has an office for publications and patents, about which I'll discuss later on, maybe you're one of the stakeholders from there. But regardless of whatever your stature is, we all need to understand that as responsible citizens of India, we have to ensure that our country progresses in the right direction. And progress is only achieved when a country innovates. Unless and until you innovate, there is no scope for progress. And that's exactly the focus point of today's talk: how to transform India. And how do we cannot suddenly transform India into a nation that innovates. We have to start from classrooms and labs, but before that, we have to start from our homes, because innovation actually begins at home. Because before going to schools and colleges, kids are at home, right? So we have to, in fact, start this innovation culture at home itself. The kids have to be educated and groomed in such a way that they grow up in a culture of innovation. At home, they should innovate. If they do that, they end up liking the idea of innovation, and when they go to schools and colleges, they can actually innovate. All right, so let me go to the second slide. So now, if we compare India with the Western nations, and if you compare it with, let's say, China, what we realize is many of the Western nations, they have more publications than India. They have more patents than what we have here in India. And if you compare India versus China, China is also, I mean, they could be doing some really terrible things, and I personally don't like the people's, the government of China. But nevertheless, they have invested lots of money into research and innovation. Not all things that China does is great. In fact, they reverse engineer and just copy and steal, and that is not innovation. So don't consider that as innovation. But nevertheless, they have put in some resources. Let me share something very interesting that Dr. Kurt Wuthrich shared with us. I had invited him for a Nobel laureate workshop. He himself is a Nobel laureate. And we had conducted a Nobel laureate workshop in Mumbai at St. Xavier's College. During that session, he said something very interesting. And me and my wife Preeti were both intrigued by what he said. He said that no doubt China is investing a lot of money and doing a lot for science, technology, and other related areas. But there is no direction and there is no way of measuring or kind of properly analyzing, and it's not going on in the kind of optimal direction, is what he said. And he's a Nobel laureate, so he has visited China many times. Now, that's not really true with Western countries. In Western countries, like I myself have my PhD from the United States. I did it from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I have interacted with a lot of people. I've interacted with 3 Nobel laureates so far, and of course many other very distinguished people, distinguished professors, top achievers, industry people, CEOs, so many people. What I clearly see that India is rapidly emerging as a country that is innovating and that has the potential to innovate even more, much more. So that's a very positive sign. That's a really great sign. And if we compare India with some other countries, maybe not the Western countries or some other countries, we are doing well, but we need to be at the top. So in order to be at the top, in order to be like the United States of America or Japan, we have to bring in some very fundamental changes to our education system. And that's exactly why I chose this topic. Like, how do we exactly bring in that transformation? It could be a school, it could be a college, it could be a university, engineering college, institute of technology, whatever organization institute is. But we need to ensure that we all innovate in whatever ecosystem we are in. So we need to publish more, we need to patent more, we also need to create more entrepreneurs. I'm sure many of you must have heard about the term research inspired entrepreneurship. So it's not a new term, actually. It's fairly kind of historic. But recently there has been a surge in the number of research inspired entrepreneurships. So what is research inspired entrepreneurship? I'll talk about it a little bit later, but just let me give you a quick overview. So basically, let's say I'm a scientist or I'm an engineer or I'm some other professional and I'm working at a university, or maybe I'm working in a company. Um, if I come up with a novel idea and I want to commercialize it, and the innovation, I need to bring it to the market, then I become an entrepreneur. I basically ask for venture capitalist funding, or I request investors to invest in my startup. And because the startup is based on science or an area of from science or technology, it's basically called research inspired entrepreneurship. It need not necessarily be from science and technology, it can also be from other areas, but most of the products that we touch and feel are from those areas. Although you could be from other areas, let's say management, you could still have a service in place. Many of those possibilities are there. uh, so, coming back to our topic, we need to be original, we need to publish patent, we need to create more entrepreneurs, and derivative work is something that we must avoid at all costs. I see a lot of researchers, pursuing that kind of work, but that really does not help. I mean, it may help you get a publication and perhaps a promotion, but it does not help the institute as such or the country per se, because that derivative work will not earn too many citations or it will not get commercialized. So, all those things are there. So let's innovate. All right, moving on to the next slide. Excuse me. Achievements. So now, a fellow at the prestigious, you must be knowing, you must have heard about this very well-known university, Carnegie Mellon University. He wrote a very insightful article on India's successful digital push. Now, all of us know that the enrollment for Aadhaar card, it began a couple of years ago, and then the entire mission was quite successful. And what he said in this article, by the way, this article was published in the Economic Times. And he said that Aadhaar was a very, it was a massively successful information technology project. And within no time, the entire nation got covered, and now everybody has Aadhaar cards, and it becomes so easy to do transactions and to do so many things once you have Aadhaar card. Then Prime Minister Narendra Modi also had launched this scheme called Jan Dhan Yojana, and around INR 69,000 crore got deposited in bank accounts. And a lot of schemes. There used to be a lot of bribery, and people used to, be corrupt and take away the money from poor people. Now things are deposited in their banks, and everything is very transparent. So that is yet another technological achievement, because it's not in the banking sector. And then, of course, UPI, everybody knows, we all use Paytm and Google Pay. The other day I went to some place, even the roadside vendor was sitting with a Paytm QR code. Isn't that fantastic? So yeah, the unified payments interface. And so these things are fairly recent. And when it comes to the digital push, India has been at the forefront. Many people, many friends, many of my friends who stay abroad in Canada and US, they say that India has one of the best cell phone plans. They are not happy with the cell phone plans available in the US and Canada. They say whenever they visit India, they feel so happy. They get like 135 GB for such a tiny amount of money. So we have been at the forefront of this digital push when it comes to the banking sector or finance, or even cell phones and IT, all those things. Yeah, so those are all good things. India has innovated in those areas for sure. These are some of the achievements, but we also need to achieve more. So let me give an example. When I had organized my very first conference, international conference, I was working as the associate director of a PhD program at RK University in Gujarat. I had invited several dignitaries, one of whom was the co-founder of Toto Express. Now, let me tell you about this innovation. This is basically an innovation from Harvard Innovation Labs. And the person who is the co-founder of this Toto Express, Gary Mao, he's basically a graduate of Stanford University. He came to Gujarat actually at RK University, and he actually delivered a fantastic lecture. And I still remember the sentence that he said. He said that he was once stuck in a traffic jam. He was staying in Gurgaon at that time. I'm not sure where he is right now, but that time there was a traffic jam, perhaps in New Delhi, and then he was stuck. Then he suddenly realized that a traffic jam, which is nothing but a roadblock is not necessarily a bad thing. A roadblock is, in fact, in his words, an opportunity to contribute. So people should not view obstacles as bad things. In fact, obstacles should be viewed as fantastic opportunities, because if you find an innovative solution, then that bad thing gets converted into a good thing or an opportunity. So that's exactly what the co-founder of Toto Express said. Ki, don't consider roadblocks as bad things. They are in fact hidden opportunities. If you can innovate, that's it. That's what we need. So let me tell you something about what he did, he and his colleague, Rebecca Hoy. So what they did is they connected rural artisans, the poor artisans from Gujarat, with the corporate world from the United States of America. How did they do that? Well, the founder visited India. She was in Gujarat, and that's how it all started. That's basically the Toto Express story. So what she was doing was she was basically following cows. She was following cows, and she was tracking cows all day long. She was just seeing what the cows were doing, where they were going. And while she was doing this, she suddenly realized that she basically landed up in an area full of artisans, and these were like really poor artisans from Gujarat, and they were very good in their artwork, but unfortunately they're not making a lot of money. So then, thanks to these cows and her project, what happened is she launched a fantastic project. It was a fantastic innovation. And what was the innovation? She basically handed these artisans, well, she went back to the United States and came back again, and she handed them digital scanners, high resolution digital scanners. So what these artisans, poor artisans, now did was they were basically sketching their artwork. They were drawing on whatever piece of paper or object they were drawing before, but they were taking photographs of these. They were digitally capturing their artwork, and the digitally captured artwork was being licensed to the corporate world. That's how exactly it was working, and that's the Toto Express concept. That's the Toto Express story. So this is just an example of how you can innovate, how you can basically identify a problem and come up with a marketable solution. And now it's so wonderful. Those people in the rural districts of Gujarat are earning in dollars, sitting right there in Gujarat, and they had never earned so much of money from their artwork. So by licensing their artwork, the digitally scanned artwork to corporate, to the corporate world, to companies from the United States and elsewhere, uh, basically Toto Express bridged the gap. So they connected the artisans to the corporate world, and they did the licensing. Such a wonderful innovation. Now let's move on to the next slide. Here's another innovation, KateWorks. Now, again, the CEO of KateWorks, Katie Taylor, she was an e-speaker for one of our conferences, international conferences, and she's basically from MIT. She used to work at the Tata Center. By the way, Tata Group of companies has established a fantastic research center, research and innovation center called Tata Center at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. So she was working there, and what KateWorks does is they basically make affordable and reliable solar powered pumps. So some of you could be mechanical engineers, many of you could be from some other areas, but we definitely know what are solar panels. Everybody knows what are solar panels, and her pumps, her irrigation systems are basically they basically work on solar energy. So instead of wasting a lot of money on diesel pumps and the fuel and the associated costs, and even the diesel pumps are not that efficient, she's actually doing a good job in India. Now she's selling these really efficient solar pumps to the farmers across India, and she has collaborated with lots of NGOs and corporate bodies. And recently, she has also been hiring. So that's another innovation. So what did she see? She saw a problem. What was the problem? The problem was that the farmers were using the uh, the less efficient, the diesel pumps that were very low in efficiency. And this was the problem that she identified. And what was her innovation? Her innovation was that she basically designed highly efficient solar powered pumps. So here's the problem and here's the solution. So that's exactly how it works. In order to innovate, you have to identify the problem and come up with a marketable solution. Well, it need not always be a commercial thing. You can always publish your work. So let's talk about the innovation pathway. So let me take a quick break and quickly ask if I'm audible. Is my presentation visible and am I clearly audible?
Sir, presentation is clearly visible and you are audible also. This is very good innovation, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikhil. All right. So the innovation pathway. Now, the very first thing you have to do is you have to identify a burning problem. Just like the co-founder of Toto Express said, that roadblocks are not essentially bad things. Roadblocks are basically to be viewed as opportunities. They are opportunities to contribute. If you have the will, if you have the desire, and if you have the right kind of training, the right kind of mindset, you can, in fact, innovate and make a very fantastic contribution to society. So you have to identify a burning problem first. And that's why I tell people that look around and see what kind of problems do you see. Can you ask your students to come up with intelligent solutions to solve those problems? That's what we need at the moment. We don't need the second law of thermodynamics and Newton's third law. Everybody knows that. We can learn it from the textbook, and of course, I mean, we need to know that. I'm not saying we do not need to know that. We need to know that, sure, but we have to go ahead and we have to basically do something more than merely knowing a few things. Knowledge is okay, that's like the basic requirement, and nowadays everybody has access to the internet and apps and so many things. So knowledge is not a problem anymore. Even the poorest of the poor has access to fantastic resources. YouTube, even one of the most distinguished lectures are available on YouTube for free. People even from villages can view it, because now we have 4G and fast internet. I have seen people sitting in villages. They are accessing really high class educational material. You must have heard about this Salman Khan Academy, not the actor Salman Khan, the actual Salman Khan who does something good. He basically has a YouTube channel. This person called Salman Khan, not the actor. He basically has a YouTube channel and he uploads educational videos to his YouTube channel. So what I'm trying to say here is that even the poorest of the poor have access to education these days. It may not be the formal kind of education necessarily, but they do have access to a lot of resources, many of which are free. And then what do we need now? Now that we have enough knowledge, we need to innovate, because knowledge alone does not help. So what's the second step? You have to come up with a novel solution. So once you identify a burning problem, you have to come up with a novel solution. Then whether to publish it or patent is up to you, and they both are important, and one is not important than the other. There are many people who say that publishing is very important and they hate patenting. There are many people who love patenting and they do not like publishing. Both of them are wrong, because in order to survive, a society needs publications as much as it needs patents. You need IPR protection as much as you need publishing. So both are two sides of the same coin. You need to publish, you need to patent. Whether or not to patent, whether or not to publish, entirely depends on the scenario and the project and so many things. But both are good and really fantastic things. But having said that, let me also quickly tell you, and many of you may actually laugh at this, but many people say that, oh, I have a patent. Okay, I say, okay, that's great. But, and many say I have a publication. Okay, great. Did you know that just like there are bad publications, you also have bad patents? So just because a person has a patent, it could be an Indian patent or US patent, does not necessarily mean that the person is outstanding. You'll be surprised and shocked to know, and I have read a lot of articles on this, that a lot of frivolous patents have been actually granted by the US Patent Organization, USPTO. US Patent and Trademark Office has actually granted some really silly patents, and you'll be surprised, but yes, that's the fact. So just like there are bad publications, there are also bad patents, but that's not our aim. Our aim is to get good publications and good patents. So okay, that was just a fun part. But on a more serious note, we need to definitely publish in good journals and basically draft meaningful patents that have commercial possibilities. You should be able to commercially exploit a patent. Then we should also think about launching startups based on novel ideas. Now, I'm sure many of you know this thing. In India, there are so many new initiatives happening, and there is this Atal Center. Then there are incubation centers at various institutes like IISc and IITs and so many places. So all those are good things, and these places, these institutes, basically they have their own incubation centers, and then these are very good for research inspired entrepreneurships. So basically the idea is really simple. Let's say you're a researcher working at a university, and then suddenly one day you come across a burning problem, and then you come across a novel solution. That is your innovation, and then you suddenly think of commercializing it. Now how do you go about doing it? You cannot suddenly start selling it, right? There's a proper process that needs to be followed. So basically what they do at incubation centers is they train people. They basically tell people how to commercialize their ideas. So they start by reviewing the innovation, then perhaps they patent it, they get a patent, then they basically give funds, provide funds to the innovator, so that the innovator can actually start selling his product, something on those lines. So it's like an end-to-end solution. So many companies have in fact grown. They started at incubation centers, and now they are like full-fledged companies, businesses. And you can see many examples. If you go to any of the university or institute websites, you'll see that many innovators who were part of the that project, and who at that particular incubation center, now they have launched their own business. And that's exactly what we call as the innovation pathway. So to quickly summarize, innovation does not necessarily mean that you have to always have a product in your hand. It could also be a publication, but the central theme here is to have a novel idea. It should be a very innovative idea, a novel concept, a very genuine original concept. You can patent it, publish it, or market it, and base your business on that. Become an entrepreneur. There are so many possibilities, but the idea is to innovate, to come up with fantastic ideas, and do the research that is required for that. All right, so just to cite an example, I'm sure most of you have seen this Startup India programs. There are so many programs, like, there is this Maruti Suzuki incubation program for mobility startups. Then there is this biotechnology ignition grant. Then there are also very specific startup programs for women. And isn't that a wonderful thing? Even women can be innovators. Take the example of Biocon. The founder is a fantastic woman. She's so brilliant. She started it so many years back, and now look at it. It is India's top biopharmaceutical company, Biocon. It's a truly great thing. So if you go to any university or institute, you'll see that they have many such startup programs, and many of them have these incubation centers. So as responsible researchers, it is our duty to ensure that our students become aware of these things. They should know these things, because many students I see, they don't even know what is Startup India. Like like 1 or 2 years ago, I went to some place and I asked the students. They were working on some project, and I just asked them whether they knew anything about Startup India, and they said they didn't have any idea. So it is our duty as educators to tell our students about these programs from the government of India. There are so many nice things happening, and I'm citing only these 2 3 examples, but if you go to the website, you'll see there are plenty and plenty and plenty of possibilities. So if you have the right idea, your institute can connect you to the right people, and once all those things get rolling, you have an end-to-end solution. You can in fact launch your business based on your research inspired innovation. All right, so now let's take a quick break and look at a few very motivating quotes. The first one: people who innovate are never afraid of failure. In fact, they enjoy failing. Now, many of you will laugh after seeing this, but it's really, I mean, it seems funny, but it's not actually. Failure is important, and why is it important? Because failure is a very good teacher. Success does not teach you anything. Failure only, it's failure that teaches you what not to do. Success, you get success. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're at the right place at the right time. Yes, great. And of course you take effort, that's why you become successful. But success rarely teaches you something. I mean, it teaches you that this is the right way, but failure also teaches you. Failure is a very good teacher because it also teaches you how not to do things. And knowing how not to do a certain thing is as important as knowing how to do a thing. And that's exactly why you see a fantastic innovation. But like, say, for example, Dyson, the company Dyson that makes these bagless vacuum cleaners, they had to do like more than, they had to do several thousand trials before coming with that design. So after several thousand failures, they came up with a successful design. So that one success story is the product of several failures. So failures are important. Everybody has to fail, because unless and until we fail, we cannot succeed. That is true. And so many people are allergic to failure. You should never be allergic to failure. You should gladly accept it and smile when you fail. Now let me go to the second quote. Do we really fail? No. We never fail really. So that's a kind of a negative term. We either win or we learn. See, if you're trying, you're never going to fail. You will either win and you will end up becoming a successful person, or you will learn, and then some other day you will be successful in some other area. Definitely, because you're trying all the time. If you if you keep trying, the entire universe, it's the law of success. Puri kainat, the entire universe is going to conspire to ensure that you become successful someday, if not tomorrow, if not today. So that is what is important. Don't think of things in terms of success and failure. Look at it as success and kaizen, or success and learning. Don't ever let's not utter the word failure. It's either, and let's teach our students to look at this from this very different angle. Anything that you do, let's look at it from only two angles. Either it's successful or you end up learning something. There is no failure. Then who fails? A person who gives up. A person who gives up or a person who quits fails. Now, at times, if you are working in a very kind of negative environment, and too many terrible things are happening, probably it's time to move on, and then you have to quit that place. That is a different story. But you should never give up your mission should never be given up. And that's what I say by being persistent. You have to be persistent. All of us have to be persistent, including you and me. And we have to be we need to learn all the time. We have to keep our eyes and ears open. Many people, they keep their mouth open and they talk, and that's not communication. Listening is also important. So we have to keep our ears open, we have to keep our eyes and all our senses open, and then we have to feel the environment. We have to see, we have to identify problems, and then we have to try to achieve what we want to achieve, so that we learn or we win. Then Just like I said before, change should be viewed as an opportunity, not as a threat. And the last one is very interesting, just like all of these. So if you see what we all see and do something that nobody else does, then you innovate. And the reason why I added the word positive in bracket is because you can also see what all see and do something totally horrible that nobody else will do. That's not what we want. That's not innovation. And this was not there in the original code, so I added the word positive. Because also there are the other kind of innovators, like for example hackers. They also innovate, but that's not the kind of work we want to do, because they also do something that nobody else does. But that's not innovation. That's misuse of technology. So we want to be innovators, but like we need to go in the positive direction. All right, so going on to the next slide. Hurdles. Now definitely whenever you take up a project, you'll no doubt you'll come up with hurdles. There will be hurdles along the path. It's part of the package. But what is important to note here is that we should never feel demotivated. We should not have any issues with issues such as lack of motivation. Procrastination is a very common habit. Chalo kal karte hain. No, do it today. Get it done. Finish it as soon as you can. So procrastination is not a good habit. Then I feel motivated. I have the will to innovate, but I don't have the right training. And this is going to be my focus area today. We have to provide adequate guidance in the form of mentorship to our students. Because if they don't get trained sufficiently, even if they have the desire and the will and the ambition to innovate, they will never be able to innovate because they need some guidance in the beginning. This reminds me of a very famous story. There was a very famous PhD professor, and I'm sure many of you, some of you could be professors. I'm sure all of us are good people. But that particular PhD guy used to sit in his air-conditioned office all the time. When his PhD students used to approach him for help, he used to say that he was too busy writing grants and working on his $1 million research proposal, and that he had no time for his students. That's not a good thing. Mentorship is not an option. Mentorship is a responsibility. As PhD guides, we have to be responsible mentors. Because if we do not provide the right training to our students, who else will? It is very important, and this is extremely critical for the development of any society or country. When you have an authority position, you also have responsibility. In the famous movie, I think, I'm not sure if it was Spider-Man or Superman, one of my previous colleagues, he was the vice chancellor, he once mentioned this in the convocation ceremony. With power comes responsibility. So if you have power, it comes with enormous responsibility. So if you're an educator, you are a very powerful person. You have to unleash the power. You have to unleash the power by providing the right mentorship and by providing opportunities to your students so that they can innovate. Challenge them sufficiently so that they innovate. Don't let them rest on their laurels. They did something great one day, fantastic. But that should not be the end of the story. They should do it on a continuous basis. Now, one common issue that I see, there is sometimes, lack of funding and resources. How do we overcome this? Well, there are ways of doing it, and I'll talk about it a little bit later down the line. Next slide. So what is it exactly? Let's take some concrete examples. Now, let's say a lot of things are being mentioned about China. So let's see the first thing. And this is very common. A Chinese engineer copies a design and builds equipment based on the copied design. He designs a fantastic jet aircraft, a fighter jet. That's not an innovation at all. That's an IPR violation. Somebody's intellectual property right got violated. You cannot just copy and steal other people's design. That is not innovation at all. Even if you design a fighter jet, even if you design a rocket, no, that's not innovation. That's IPR violation. So when you basically try to communicate these concepts to your students, tell them that innovation is all about being original. You have to be really original, and that is what is critical. So the second example, Indian scientist synthesizes a compound that is able to kill liver cancer cells with great selectivity. Basically, drug design, that is an innovation. Or Indian engineer develops a tiny device to track stolen cars. Such a fantastic idea. That again is a technological innovation. So all these are basically examples of innovation. All right, so moving on to the next slide. So where do we start exactly? We start at home, because kids suddenly don't start going to schools and colleges, right? They start at home. The mom teaches her kids, the dad teaches his kids, and grandparents and siblings and relatives and friends, neighbors. So as responsible adults, we have to ensure that our kids feel enthusiastic about innovating. Start it at home. Start with something simple. Challenge your kids today. After this seminar, after this webinar, you can go home and challenge your kid today to do something. And I'm sure, because kids always love challenges, they'll take up the challenge and come up with something. It could be a bad idea, no problem, but at least it's an idea. They can build on that idea maybe 10 years from now. So that's why innovation starts at home. And instead of just talking in the air, I'll actually give you a concrete example, like something that I tried at home. I did not try it. I kind of proposed it. If one of you wants to try it out and patent it, you're most welcome. I'll talk about it a little later. So then, educational institutes must provide the right environment and the right training to their students and researchers. And of course, if you're in an office, let's say you work in a company, you need to get rewarded. Why do we get? Why do we need to have rewards? Not to make other people jealous. That's a very common misconception. Rewards are not there to make other people jealous. Rewards are there to encourage other people. So if somebody, now I had once I was working at an MNC in Mumbai, and they recognized me as an ace innovator. So I got the award at the end of that month. Like it was like a recognition and rewards event. So I was recognized as an ace innovator. So then people congratulated me. I just said, see, it's teamwork. It's not just me. It's the entire team. And I may have been credited because I was the manager, but still it's based on teamwork. So the credit goes to all of you. The credit goes to the team. So we have to be very responsible when we get rewarded or awarded. Many people, as soon as they get half an award, they are in this, they're on cloud nine, and then they stop mentoring. They sit in air conditioned offices. They try to avoid their PhD students. They refuse to meet with other people, and they are in their own world. So we should avoid doing all these things. We have to behave responsibly. We have to provide the right support. We have to provide the right infrastructure to people, and that's how we should basically follow this in order to innovate. Now here's the innovation. Okay, this was a household innovation. Now I enjoy cooking. When I was a bachelor, many of you will be surprised, I actually cooked for my roommates when I was staying in the US. I was cooking for almost 4.5 years. And then we used to cook. We used to be like 5 people staying together. We had distributed each day. So Monday somebody used to cook, and Tuesday somebody used to cook. So one thing I realized, that when cutting onions, it brings to a lot of tears to my eyes. So as responsible parents, we can always ask our kids, can you fix this, Betty, beta? Can you take care of this? Can you innovate? So let me share something very interesting that came to my mind. I'm not sure if it exists. I'm not sure if it exists. If it doesn't, then maybe somebody should take it up and get a patent for it. I mean, I would have been glad to do that, but I was like stuck with too many other things. Tear-free onion cutter. It's a like household innovation that I did. then after consulting my wife, of course. And then it's a simple device for cutting onions without getting tears in your eyes. I'm not sure if there is an Indian or US patent. You can do a prior art search and then try to see if it exists. If not, maybe one of you can talk to me and I'll freely give it to you. You can patent it. And then and of course don't use plastic. So idea is very simple. Let me enlarge the design for you so that you see it clearly. The idea is very simple. This is the idea. So basically take a box, take a glass box, or yeah, basically a glass box. And then I'm not sure how many of you are chemists, but if you have ever seen a hood, there's a special hood that is completely like sealed. The only way to enter is by putting your hand inside two gloves, and the rest of the hood is sealed actually. So a similar idea came to my mind. So you take a glass box, completely seal it, and of course there will be a door somewhere to open it. Otherwise, how will things go inside? But then the only way to access it when the door is closed is to put your hands inside the two gloves. And then you chop the onions or cut the onions or do whatever you want to do with the onions. Transfer it to a container, close the container, and then you just quickly pull it out, and that's it. That's exactly how you can avoid you can prevent tears from coming to your eyes. So this is just a quick innovation. Just wanted to share it with you. So it's a very easy household innovation. And similarly, so why did I show this innovation? Because I want everybody to not think of innovation as something that takes place only in universities or in companies or in the Silicon Valley. Innovation starts at home. Just look around and identify a problem. In this case, what was the problem? And it was really a burning problem because it was really burning my eyes. So I can literally call it a burning problem. So the burning problem was that this onion was, causing my eyes to tear up, and then I came up with a innovative solution. All right. So moving on, patent sources, publications. So now, many of you publish in good journals. Let's say you're a synthetic organic chemist. You create a novel organic compound. It's like a drug, or almost like an earlier version of a drug. So a compound which, if modified a little bit, can turn into a drug, a therapeutic drug, pharmaceutical grade compound. So basically, that's an innovation. That's definitely an innovation. And it is an innovation that can be patented and then marketed and everything. So now whether to patent it or whether to publish it is entirely up to you. If you are an organic chemist and if you want to publish your work in the topmost journal from chemistry, you can do that. You can go ahead and do it. But maybe if you don't want to do that and if you want to patent it, that's also okay. Why do we require patents, by the way? Because we don't want some silly companies to imitate it and make cheaper imitations that are of low quality. And that is very important. So that's why IPR protection, patenting is also important, but so is publication. Because if you patent everything, then the field cannot progress. Whereas if you publish everything, then there will be cheap imitations, and then again there's a problem. So you have to have the right balance, patents versus publications. It should not be actually called patents versus publications. It should be patents and publications. So you have to patent and you have to publish. So depending on the situation and your priorities and many other things, of course. All right. So if you have a good research publication, just like I mentioned, the field advances in the right direction. Now, if you have good patents, it prevents, just like I said, some creepy businesses from making low quality imitations. And that ensures product quality, product or service quality or process quality, because you don't want any creepy business to make profits from extremely low quality products and services. And just like I said before, yes, just like bad publications, bad patents also exist, not just in India, but also in the US. US Patents and Trademark Office, USPTO, PTO has in fact granted some famous patents. It may come as a surprise to you, but it's a fact. So we have to be responsible and we have to have good publications and good patents because both are equally important for the progress of society. Now, coming to our main topic, classroom innovation. Now, how do you start innovation? Innovation starts at home and then it gets catalyzed, it gets further boosted when students enter schools and colleges. So, how do you start innovating? How do you encourage or motivate your students to start innovating? Well, you have to start encouraging them to ask questions. You must encourage your students to ask meaningful questions. Asking any question is okay. I mean, no question is a bad question per se, but you should also train your students to ask meaningful questions. What is a meaningful question? A meaningful question is a question that is designed in such a way that it basically shows that you have done your homework. A silly question is like some random question that comes to your mind, you haven't given it a thought. I should not really say a silly question, but a question. But you don't want your students to ask a question. You want your students to ask an intelligent question. And for that to happen, you have to tell them that whenever you ask a question, make sure that you do your homework first. And then based on that, ask a smart question. Because see, why is that important? I'll share an example. I know somebody who went to a conference. I think it was in Washington, D.C. or in Boston. I don't know where, probably New York. And the person told me that at that conference, he presented a paper and somebody asked a question, a very smart question, and he was not able to answer that question. So at that time, what he said is, oh, that's a very intelligent question. That's an interesting question. I don't have the answer for it right now, but I'll definitely think about it. So then he came back to his lab, and when he talked about it with his research group, they in fact thanked the person for asking that question at the conference, because when they discussed this question and the related problem, they actually came up with a novel idea. And then their next publication, or rather next few publications, were entirely based on that question. So that's why it is important to ask meaningful questions. And I'm sure they must have thanked the person. Now, see, if you ask a question, that does not immediately make you the author of a paper. This is one really very common misconception. Just because you share an idea does not immediately make you an author. In order to be an author, you have to make a very legitimate and direct contribution. Many people can give many ideas, but the person who actually implements the idea and works on it is the person who gets the authorship or the patent or whatever. So you have to go through the process. People will always share thousands of ideas. That does not mean you should have 1,000 authors on your paper. Let's say 100 questions, 100 people ask you 100 questions. So don't list all of them as authors. So just came to my mind. There is a fine line of distinction between a person who asks a question and person who actually contributes in a meaningful manner. You can always acknowledge some person if you feel strongly about his question. You can always say that thanks to this person's support. But for becoming an author, you need the person to make a very meaningful, direct contribution. Okay, now real world problems need to be discussed in your class with the students, and you should ask your students to come up with smart solutions. So what you have to do is you have to basically go to the Indian Patent Office website and have a look at their patents, not the pending patents, the granted patents. There is a fine line of distinction between pending patents and granted patents. Pending patents means they are not yet, they have not been scrutinized, and they could in fact be rejected, some of them, if not all. But so you have to study granted patents. So what happens when your students or you study granted patents? You see what problem the person saw and others didn't, and then how that person came up with a novel idea. Same is true with publications. You have to constantly keep reading new publications, new papers, because you come to know burning questions in your field of expertise. and how the person came up with elegant and innovative solutions. So just like you discuss real world problems and tell your students how people solve them, you should also discuss unsolved real world problems in your classroom. And then you have to ask your students to come up with innovative and practical solutions. You have to challenge them sufficiently, because if you don't challenge your students sufficiently, who else will? So as educators, it is really our responsibility to challenge our students, and we must definitely go in that direction. All right. So when you, as educators, whenever you discuss a particular concept or principle or law or theory in your class, never discuss it in a very pedantic, bookish, and boring manner. Try to relate it with real world examples. So make it very interesting. They should always, all these concepts and principles should be discussed by highlighting some real life problems. Let me share a few examples. A lot of us most of us have had these potato chips, and then that bag is always like inflated, and it's full of certain gas. Now, what is this gas? They basically package it with nitrogen gas, because nitrogen is an inert gas. So if you're a chemistry teacher and you're teaching your students about properties of gases, what you can do is you can tell them that nitrogen is used for packaging potato chips because nitrogen is an inert gas and it does not react with other ingredients of the present in the bag. So basically it prevents the potato chips from going bad, because if it's oxygen instead of nitrogen, then oxygen will definitely react, and then the potato chips will go bad very soon. So just a direct example of how you can discuss a concept, a science concept, or any engineering concept based on principles, and relate principles and laws and ideas with real world situations. Now in New York, just before snowstorms, they salt all the roads. Why do they do that? Because when you add salt, what happens is salt plus ice, it basically causes a depression in the freezing point of water. So when ice, instead of remaining frozen, the ice at that temperature, it remains in the liquid state. So then it prevents the formation of ice, and it prevents cars and people from slipping off the road. So that's why they spread salt on the streets of New York and other places in cold countries. But this is a direct application of this concept called depression in freezing point. So this is how you have to teach your students. Give them a real life example and then explain the concept. That's classroom innovation. Well, a part of it. So now let me share a protocol with you. So what you can do is every week you can do this in your classroom, and perhaps you might want to discuss this with your board of studies and in fact incorporate this into your curriculum. You can visit Google Patents or the Indian Patent Office website or the US PTO website, and then you can look at granted patents, you can look at published papers, and then find an innovation that addresses real world problems. Then of course the innovation should be related to whatever topic you're teaching in your classroom that week, or probably the topic that you taught in the last week, because that's exactly how students can relate to what they're studying. So for example, let's say you're an engineer and you're teaching your students something about thermodynamics. So you have to go to the Indian Patent Office website or Google Patents and find a patent related to thermodynamics, heat transfer, something on those lines, and then share that with your students. So that way students will know that, okay, this is the thermodynamic part of it, and this is the second law of thermodynamics, and this is Newton's third law, and that is some other principle, and this is an actual application, this is a patent that somebody filed at the USPTO or at the Indian Patent Office or with WIPO. and or this is a publication that has got a lot of citations, something on those lines. So you have to basically discuss real life problems with your students, and then if there are some problems that do not have solutions, you have to ask your students to come up with innovative solutions in 10 minutes, and then keep a track of student performance, and then share these results with your placement cell. As soon as you do that, students will start innovating. Now many of you must have started like smiling and laughing, because I know how exactly things work at universities and colleges. The moment anything goes to the placement cell, students are going to take it seriously, because their entire the employment prospects depend on that. So the placement cell will have a copy of the student's performance throughout the 3 or 4 years of his college life. And if a student is very innovative, it will reflect on that sheet, and that will help companies recruit the best, and that will also encourage students to give their best to perform at par with the best in the industry or in academia. So basically you could do it either way. You could either discuss a solved problem or discuss an unsolved problem, but ask your students to come up with a novel solution, and more than the solution, look at how they attacked the problem. So this is exactly what you have to do, and you have to track their performance. Now you can vary this method a little bit. It's entirely up to you. You have that freedom as educators. You don't have to exactly follow my protocol, but this is just an idea that I thought of sharing in order to bring in some fun and enthusiasm to the classroom. So let's move on to the next slide. Now, how do you access publications? Now, it is very important to have access. Now, Google Patents, of course, it's a free of cost thing. You don't have to pay a dime for that. But in order to access publications, you need access to like something like Science Direct, or there are so many other websites. So you need to have paid access to these websites. And now again, there's a difference between paid access to these really fantastic databases and some paid journals. So don't confuse between those two. The paid journal thing in India is very different. There are very creepy people who accept a publication at 8 a.m. in the morning, then say that it got reviewed at 10 a.m. and by 3 p.m. it gets accepted. And then how many people read it? Probably two. The author and the editor, that's it, and probably the author's like spouse at the most. The friends will avoid him because he's publishing in some very weird journals. So that's a completely different picture. What I'm saying here is access to Science Direct, which comes at a cost. So when I was working as the associate director of the PhD program at RK University, I requested management to give access to these fantastic publication databases. And then, yes, management was kind enough to grant access. And then I did some homework and asked around like what kind of publications researchers wanted the most, and accordingly requested management to give to ensure access to those publications. And then we paid a fee and got access to really fantastic Scopus Index journals. And then people really started reading a lot, and then many people published, and all those things. Now Indian Patent Office also has a website, USPTO has a website, WIPO, similarly Google Patents. All of these you can access. Some are free, some of them charge a fee. So but you have to ensure that you give access to your students at least to a few of these resources, if not all, ideally all, but at least a few, so that students at least come to know what's happening there. Because unless they read, unless they go through granted patents and highly cited papers, they'll not know what's happening. Just by merely reading the abstract, they cannot know anything much. So you have to ensure that your students get access to patents and publications, granted patents and highly cited papers. Now, laboratory innovations. Let's focus our attention to the laboratory now. So just like we can have innovations in the classroom, we can also have innovations in the laboratory. So this is just a quick recipe that came to my mind. You can, of course, you can change it. So let's say we have 3 months, and usually a semester comprises 3 or 4 months. It could be longer or shorter, depending on where you are. So let's say in the first month, we can set up some innovative experiments and then just ask students to observe, record their observations, and then evaluate them based on that. Second month, probably we can assign tasks to students, not group activities, like individual tasks. And the third month, we could have it as a group activity. But then group activity with individual responsibilities, because many times in India what happens is, as soon as a group activity is assigned, and let's say there are 5 people, there are 5 students in a group, only 2 of them actually work, and the remaining 3, they just get their grades based on the hard work done by these two students. So don't, let's not do it that way. If it's a group activity, each group member has to contribute to a very specific area, so that when you evaluate, you can actually give credit to each person. And that's exactly what is very important. Many times in projects, what happens is group activities don't work out because the evaluation process is not correct. So if you set this up in the right way, you can actually, and I'm not saying that all of these things are necessarily, what UGC or some other AICTE has recommended. This is something that educators can do themselves in consultation with their institute, and you can maintain a separate documentation, you can maintain a separate file for each student. And besides the students grades, when companies come for placement, you can also hand over this other file, which is a record of the students performance in innovations, in sharing innovative ideas and how they basically try to solve problems, and your evaluation based on their innovation and all their hard work from 3 or 4 years. It could be from science, it could be from engineering or any other field. So if you keep a record like that, and at the end of the 4th year or 3rd year, you can actually hand over that file to the student. And when the student goes outside for interviews, he can, in fact, he or she share that file with potential employers. So, that's a very good practice. I'm not sure if it is followed anywhere in the world. And that's exactly why I thought of sharing this with you. Because if it is not being done anywhere, that's the first thing that you should do. And it's an opportunity. So let's start thinking on these lines. All right, so moving to the next slide. So at the end of every month, just like I said, you set up innovative experiments. Then sometimes you can ask industry people to show demonstrations. You should always talk to industry people because they are at the forefront of all the innovations, and even many universities are at the forefront. Like, for example, in Israel, there is a university that has lots of companies based in their premises. So their research centers are there, right there in the university. So there's a huge collaboration between the corporate world and the academic world at many Israeli universities, even in the US. But this example in Israel is very prominent. So the key idea here is to talk to people from academics, but also talk to people from industry. And then again, just like I said, you accurately record students' observations after they see a demonstration. It could be your demonstration or it could be the demonstration shown by the company people. And then you basically ask questions, or you may make up a quiz and then evaluate student performance based on how creatively they think and how creatively they approach a problem. Don't base your answers on simple things like multiple choice. Try to be a little more subjective and try to see how they approach a problem rather than just giving them multiple choice questions. Sometimes those things are also important. All right, so moving on to the next slide. Now the second task could be based on existing laboratory infrastructure. You have to assign certain tasks, very specific tasks, and these should not be group activities. They should be given to each student. Give them a time of 4 weeks and then check on their innovation at the end of the 4th week. And remember that these should not be your routine science and engineering experiments or any other experiments. It could be any other field, not necessarily science and engineering, but the experiments need not be routine, should not be routine. And once again, you have to document their creativity and then share technical feedback. Now, your job is not just to document and share the file with the placement cell. You also have to share technical feedback with your students at the end of every month. Like as soon as you finish evaluating them, you have to share the feedback, because unless they get the feedback in a timely and consistent manner, they are not going to be able to improve themselves. Without feedback, none of us can improve, and that's why feedback is so critical. Many people don't like feedback. They are like, they say that they are really amazing people who have so many publications and patents, and they don't like others who have fewer publications and fewer patents to give them feedback. But that's not correct. You have to have feedback from, you can have feedback from almost anyone. As long as it is legitimate feedback, it should be welcome. We must always be open to feedback. Feedback is critical for progress. All right, so the next one. Now, in the third month, just like I said, you have to repeat the same activity, and it should, but only this time, the difference this time is that it will be a group activity. But then there's a difference. Each group member gets assigned a very specific task, and that's the biggest difference between what is being currently carried out and then what I'm trying to suggest. And then again, you have to document your findings and share it with the placement cell and share feedback with the students. And why do we need to have group activity? Why just not have only individual projects? Because see, at the end of the day, when students enter the corporate world, they are going to work with a team. And in order to be able to work with a team efficiently, you need to be familiar with the protocols. And this is the right time and this is the right place to teach students something about teamwork, something about leadership. And you can basically teach these things through your laboratory innovations, or rather, they can teach it themselves through their laboratory innovations. You're just acting as a catalyst. You're just being a mentor. You're basically taking the role or adopting the role of a mentor, a leader, a thought leader, and then your students are innovating and you're giving them feedback. So that's the ideal kind of a situation. So let's continue with classroom and laboratory innovations. Now, internships and fests. Now, these are also very important, and I'm sure these fests, they happen at so many institutes across India. I have myself been to many. They're quite interesting. So are internships. All right. Now, definitely, it's not a new concept, but it's important. Now, many students go for industry-sponsored internships, and because these internships basically they teach students something about innovation. It could be industrial innovation, and if it is a university-based project, it could be innovation at the academic level. But nevertheless, it's innovation. And of course, science and technology fairs could be held. But see, here's the twist. If you are an educator and you're trying to organize a tech fest, for example, or a science and technology fair, what you have to do is you have to evaluate students based on how they suggest improvements to other people's projects. But remember this, you have to do this by adopting a completely random and anonymous assignment, because the moment you tell the students who gave the feedback, there will be a fight between the person who gave the feedback and the person who has worked on the project. So everything has to be anonymous. Person A should not know who has given the feedback, and something on those lines. And the assignment should be random and anonymous. So if you do that, and so what will happen because of this? See, currently what is happening, I go to so many fests. What do the students do? They just go to some website, they just copy whatever is there, they make a project, and they spend 2000 rupees and they put some robot there, and they say, oh, I designed this fantastic mechanical device or robot perhaps, and look at my innovation. That's actually not innovation. But unfortunately, that's what's happening. They just copy some projects and then they put it up at fests, and they even get the first prize. Don't be surprised. So my evaluation will never be based on what they have done for their project. My evaluation is based on how they evaluate their friend's project. Now, as soon as you introduce this concept, the quality bar will go up, because people will try to make the most difficult projects so that their friends cannot point any mistake. I mean, that's not possible. Regardless of how great your product is, there will always be some drawbacks. I have yet to see a product that has zero drawbacks. Even the best product available in the market today will become obsolete tomorrow. Many of you might be having an iPhone. Is that the best product available in the market today? Maybe. But tomorrow, it may not be the best product. Why? Because today, even today, as we speak, the best iPhone still has some drawbacks. And that's the basic point that I want to convey here, that when you ask your students to basically try and find out the drawbacks of the project that their friend has worked on, you basically are telling your student to start thinking critically. And you're basically telling the other person who has done the project to ensure that his project better be good. So the person has to ensure that his project is original and novel and not just copied from some website. This is how you have to do it. And this is how you can actually do it. Don't wait for AICTE. Don't wait for UGC. They don't really have the time or the bandwidth or the capacity to do these things. As educators, we have the freedom to decide what we want to do. Just talk to your management, just talk to your leadership, and then if you are passionate enough, anything can be done. Anything, virtually anything. When I wrote a grant proposal, I asked management to grant me some money. I ended up getting 500 crore, 50 lakhs, and I was able to successfully establish a research center, which later on got inaugurated by a Nobel laureate. So yes, everything is possible. Why not? You just have to go for it. If you have the passion, you can do anything. All right. So by the way, let me ask a quick question now. No, not a question actually, but many of you must be having these offices, the Office of Publications and Patents. If not, it's high time you establish this office at your institute, because having an office for publications and patents is incredibly useful these days. Because when I was in Gujarat, I saw that many universities there were aggressively patenting their innovations. And one university had in fact hired a patent agent, or I think he was a patent attorney. And then the person was aggressively filing patents for that university. I'm not sure how many of those patents actually got granted, but nevertheless, they were doing that. So if you are an educator, if you are an administrator, if you are a leader at an educational institute, you have to ensure that your institute has a patent office, like office for basically enhancing this process of publications, publishing and patenting. So you have to hire, either you could hire a visiting patent attorney or a visiting patent agent, or you can have full-time patent attorney, patent agent. Similarly, you can have a visiting or a full-time scientific editor. Now, who are these people, patent agents and scientific editors? I'll talk more about this during my afternoon session on alternative careers. So patent agent is an alternative career for scientists and engineers. Scientific editing is also an alternative career for scientists, engineers, and so many other people. So definitely, I'll talk about this a little later in my next session today afternoon. All right, moving on to the next slide. So who fails basically? First of all, just like I said before, people who sincerely try, they never fail. They basically win or they learn. And people who don't try, they definitely fail. People who try either win or they learn. Now, innovation is really critical for the progress of humanity because just like I said before, whatever innovation you see today may not necessarily be good tomorrow. So in order to be successful, you have to constantly innovate. You cannot innovate once and then say that, oh yes, I innovated, and then now I can just rest on my laurels and I got an award in the year 1987. That does not help. You have to do it on a continual basis. So if you don't innovate, what will happen is your competitor will innovate, and basically a nation's progress. If you want our country to prosper, you have to ensure that you constantly innovate, because as a nation, we also have other countries competing with us fiercely. For example, China. So in order to stay ahead in the race, we have to beat the competition. We have to be ahead of our competition. And the only way of doing that is by ensuring continual progress in the form of innovation, creativity. It could be in the form of publications, patents, entrepreneurial innovations, entrepreneurial initiatives, so many of those things. But you need to innovate. That's the central message here. All right, so I'll share some stories of innovation now. I think we have about 28 minutes left. So first, Arthur Fry's 3M notes. Now, usually during the we are having this session for 2 hours. 1.5 hours is over. Generally, by the end of the 90th minute, people start losing their patience. So now I'm going to tell you some interesting stories so that once again I can capture your attention. I'm sure all of you were paying attention, so I'm not doubting that. But let's check out these very interesting stories of innovation. So the first story, Arthur Fry was going to a church and he was placing some pieces of paper inside his the book that he was referring to at his church. And whenever he used to open that book, the pieces of paper used to fall down all the time. So then he attended a seminar, and the seminar was being delivered by a person who had just invented a glue, an adhesive substance that was kind of sticky, but not so much sticky. It was somewhere in between. It was sticky, but not so much sticky. So then what he did is, that's exactly how he invented sticky notes or the post-it notes that we use so often these days. So post-it notes, they have a strip of glue at the backside and they can easily stick to so many surfaces. But you can also easily remove them and put them somewhere else. And they don't fall off. Not at least for 2 3 years, maybe after 4 5 years they may fall off. But generally they don't tend to fall off quickly. So the innovation was the result of this idea, and then how often we use sticky notes. It's a very commonly used product these days. The same thing is true with a traffic signal. William Potts was working as a police officer in Detroit, and the world's first three-color signal was in fact designed by a policeman, not by an engineer. It was designed by a policeman in the 1920, but unfortunately he never patented it. So if you have an innovation and if you have the time and the resources, you should go ahead and patent your innovation. Talk to a patent agent, talk to a patent attorney. And that's exactly why you should have a patent office at your patent facilitation office at your institute. So then General Electric purchased the patent from a person called Garrett Morgan, who patented it, and then they started installing it across the United States. And today the traffic signal that we see, it is the brainchild of William Potts, who was a police officer, and he was basically tired of standing in that intersection all day long, inhaling the smoke. So because of this innovation, now we have fewer traffic police standing at intersections because it is an automated process. So the idea again is simple. You have to come up with a novel idea after identifying a burning problem. So now this is the story of the invention of the wheeled suitcase. The diagram that you see, this diagram, figure 2, I have actually pulled it from the from Google Patents. Actually, if you go to Google Patents, if you go to that web page and search for this patent, you'll actually see the diagrams. This is one of those diagrams. So basically, we carry this wheeled suitcase so many times whenever we travel, whenever we fly to another place, another country. But this is the brainchild of pilot Robert Plath. And why did he want to go ahead with this innovation? How did the idea come to his mind? Because he saw people running around with their luggage, and it was so difficult to transport the luggage. He just said, why not attach a wheel? And why not attach a handle? And that's how he came up with this idea. So again, the story is the same. He identified a burning problem and then came up with an intelligent solution. Now, heated shaving razor. Now, many of us who shave, we know that if you get up on a cold morning, especially in December or even in January, February, even in Maharashtra, in Pune, where I'm staying right now, it's cold even right now. If you start to shave you in the morning, it's kind of a little bit annoying for your facial skin. So then Gillette came up with this idea. They recently got a patent, US patent, for a heated shaving laser. So the shaving laser is not only going to be full of foam, the smooth foam, but it will also be heated. So because it is heated, the entire process of shaving is going to be very enjoyable. And the inventor is Matthew James Hodgson. And this patent was granted quite recently, in I think 2019, perhaps. You can go and check it on the US patent, USPTO website or on Google Patents. Yet another story. Now this innovation from MIT is so interesting. I really like this. Very, very interesting innovation. This is an alarm clock that tricks you actually. It is an MIT innovation. So what the alarm clock does is every time the alarm rings, this particular alarm clock jumps. It has the name clocky. It jumps and it hides at a new position. And you have to actually get up and you have to go and find where that clock is hiding, and then you have to get it. So which means that you have to get up. You cannot just snooze the alarm clock and sleep. Such a fantastic innovation. And I think it even got the IG Nobel Prize, I guess. They kind of made a fun of it by giving it the IG Nobel Prize, but in fact it's a good innovation and they're selling it right now. Now this barcode, we see this barcode so many times at so many places, but the first barcode was scanned at a grocery store in 1974 in Ohio, United States. And it was printed on Wrigley's chewing gum, the packaging that contained the chewing gum manufactured by Wrigley's. It had the first barcode. And now it's a very common thing. You will go to any store, any place, grocery store, mall, you always see these barcodes, but it was invented back in 1974. Now, here's a very recent example. Innovation is not limited to engineering. Innovation can be done by absolutely any person from any stream. This is an innovation, and definitely from science. The science is the master of all streams. Once you know science, you can. I know a friend of mine, by the way. His name is John Rafter. He's a scientist by profession. He's a trained scientist, but he was hired as an engineer by the company, because he entirely worked on the setup of a confocal microscope. And although he was a scientist by training, he was hired as an engineer by the company. So that's what I say. You don't have to constantly keep on highlighting your label. You could be a scientist, but you could work as an engineer. You could be an engineer, but you could work as a scientist. So let's try to forget these labels and let's try to have an interdisciplinary, intradisciplinary, and multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. So we have to forget all our labels and we have to view it strictly as a problem and a solution. You can get the training you want and you can work on any area. There is no area is out of reach if you have the right training. There are countless examples of people from one area going into the other, and so all of those things can be done. Now, Dr. Sarah Gilbert, she's a PhD from University of Hull, UK. She's the person responsible for the invention of this fantastic coronavirus vaccine, which, by the way, is being manufactured at the Serum Institute located in Pune. Serum Institute Pune is proudly manufacturing it for the world today. Such a fantastic thing. And Dr. Sarah Gilbert, and of course, there are other people who have co-invented this vaccine. She has a PhD, she's a scientist, she has a PhD from the University of Hull, UK, and she is behind this fantastic biomedical innovation. So, as innovators, you have to identify a burning problem. What was the burning problem here? It was a massively burning problem. The global pandemic, as we all know, it was really causing a lot of trouble. And she came up with the idea of using her expertise in science to come up with this fantastic vaccine. And then she, along with other co-workers, went ahead and basically invented this vaccine. Such a fantastic innovation from Oxford University. Currently, this vaccine is being manufactured in Pune at the Serum Institute. Okay, DNA fingerprinting is a very widely used forensic technique. Like, for example, there's a crime scene and the cops come to the location. The very first thing is they seal the territory. They say, police line, do not cross. Many of you must be seeing these shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime. They always have this, what they call unsolved mysteries. So how do they solve these unsolved mysteries? Many of these are solved by using DNA-based forensic techniques. So DNA fingerprinting, if human hair or other samples are found at a particular crime scene, they can actually extract the DNA from those samples and then compare the DNA with a standard database, and then they can identify the criminal. So that's a great innovation. Similarly, HIV protease inhibitors. This company Hoffen-La Roche, they invented the first HIV protease inhibitor called Invirase, and this was primarily based on the work of Joseph Martin and Sally Redshaw. Such a fantastic innovation. So similarly, depending on your area of expertise, you can definitely carry out cutting edge work and innovate in your particular area of expertise. Now, sharing one more innovation. Everybody is familiar with the QR code. It was initially designed to allow high speed scanning of components, and the inventor is a Japanese person. QR code was invented actually back in 1994. We use it so often these days. Now let's switch gears and talk about how to create conducive environments. So when I was working at a private university, RK University in Gujarat, I basically was instrumental in facilitating the establishment of this research center, and I basically requested management to grant money, and I wrote a proposal. We had several meetings, and then I did presentations, and we had back and forth meetings and discussions and lots of things. And eventually, I was really pleased when the management was generous enough, kind enough to grant 50 lakh. And then I contacted Nobel laureate Ada Yonath, who was in Gujarat at the same time, and she happily agreed to come for the inauguration. And today, you see her name. The research center has her name on it. So basically, this is just an example of how you can provide a conducive environment. The research center, by the way, has really cutting edge equipment with which researchers and students can carry out research. And they're also doing a lot of other things like, making their facility available for outside people. So that there are collaborations and, so many things. So this is how you have to create conducive environments. You have to request management to provide funding, then you have to write some very impressive proposals. You have to answer questions because people will ask questions. You have to answer them. I did all of this, and then I was instrumental. And it was just not me. It is, again, just like I say, it's always teamwork. So I always thank all the people, all of my colleagues who helped me establish this facility. And of course, I also thank the management. So just an example of how you can create conducive environments to facilitate innovation. There you see, inaugurated by Nobel laureate Dr. Ada Yonath. She's an Israeli Nobel laureate, by the way. All right, the next one. Me and my wife had organized a workshop in Mumbai at St. Xavier's College. I contacted Biocon, and based on a single email, I wrote a very kind of impressive. I mean, I myself should not say that, but they thought that it was an impressive email. And then, based on just one email, Biocon actually approved funds worth almost $2,500. They directly transferred the money to the Nobel laureate's account. I think it was, I'm not sure if it was a Swiss account or American account, bank account. And then the Nobel laureate actually came and delivered a lecture. And we had this fantastic workshop, Indo-US Nobel laureate workshop. We carried it out we conducted it at St. Xavier's College. That's me, my wife, the Nobel laureate, and Mr. Yatindra Joshi. He's a famous scientific editor. And I'll talk about this field of expertise later on. But the idea is as follows. You have to really motivate your students. And how do you do that? You have to, of course, have innovations in your classroom. Of course, you have to have innovations in your laboratory. But you also need to motivate them. And these are various ways of motivating them. Organizing workshops, webinars, seminars, and, inviting dignitaries, inviting people who have really carved a niche and who have established themselves in their areas, Nobel laureates, CEOs, so many people. So you have to establish research centers, you have to organize these sessions, and that's exactly how you create environments that are conducive to research and innovation. Here's one more example. We had organized this conference on research-inspired entrepreneurship, and then again we had invited keynote e-speakers, including, Nobel laureate Dr. Alan Heeger, and then we had experts from MIT, USA. We also had some other distinguished speakers from Stanford IIT, Mumbai. So just one more example. And all right, so let me share one more slide here. I think I just have a couple of slides left. I was also instrumental in facilitating this conference on transformations in engineering education, and many of you attending today's webinar are probably engineers. So I'm happy to let you know that at that time we had invited a lot of dignitaries from the United States, Australia, and probably one more country. And then there were so many people actually came to Gujarat and they interacted with the researchers and students there. It was really a fantastic event. And the key emphasis was on revamping engineering education with emphasis on soft skills development and some other related areas. So just like creating conducive environments, it's also important to train students in some other key areas such as soft skills. Soft skills development is very important, how to communicate. So that was the key focus of that conference. Just one more example of how to create environments that are conducive for innovation. Because see, effective communication is also important. When you are an innovator, if you are inventing something, and if you cannot communicate your invention effectively to your target audience, then how will people understand? How will the patent agent or patent attorney draft a patent? Or how will you publish? So you need to communicate. And by communication, I just don't mean technical communication. Also, verbal and written communication. So you have to be very good in those things. And then soft skills, getting along with people, working in teams, all those things. So that was the basic idea behind organizing this conference. And I was happy to be a part of it. I was happy to facilitate it. Okay, just one more final example before we move on to the question and answer session. So what happened is, many of you must have visited the Shodh Ganga website, and then the InfluentNet Center in Gandhinagar, Gujarat maintains this website. So I'm not sure how it looks like today, but when I saw it a few years ago, I saw that all the PhD theses are listed on the website. And then if you open a thesis, all the theses are listed as as like thesis chapters. So if I want to access a thesis, I have to click on the first chapter, then open up the second chapter, then third chapter, and there are like 17 PDF files. So as soon as I saw that, I proposed merging the thesis chapters into a single document. Then me and my colleague Amit Latigra, we visited the InflipNet Center, and here we are sitting with the, I think he's the resource person there, and then we shared this idea with him. And I'm not sure how it looks like today. You might want to go and check, but they liked the idea, and then they said that there were some hurdles because it's like a government institute, and then some things need to happen, and I'm not sure where it is today, but nevertheless we shared the idea from our side. And the idea was simple: why don't you merge all the chapters into one, so that when a person tries to access anybody's PhD thesis, he or she does not have to click on 17 different files to access chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So Amit in fact wrote a script for that, and we went there and demonstrated how we can quickly access the Shodh Ganga website, and by just run a script and merge all files into one. Now, was this script new? No. But what was new? The idea of merging these into a single file was new. So, but that could not have been possible without having expertise from my colleague, the expertise of my colleague. So I also credit him for that. And so the entire package developed into an innovative idea. And then this is just an example that I wanted to share how we spotted an opportunity or a burning problem and converted it into something meaningful. All right, so I think let's quickly summarize now. We have only 10 minutes left, about 8 minutes left. So innovation is fun. If you're creative, you must innovate. Innovation is not just restricted to science and technology fields. You can be an educator or student, researcher, an administrator, or any person on earth. You can innovate in your respective field of expertise. And do you really wish to see India flourish? Then you must innovate. Then we must all innovate. You and me and our friends and our relatives and our neighbors and our students and everybody. Every citizen of India must innovate. Innovation is really fun. So let's end on a very positive note. Let's ensure that we maintain our interest in innovation and continue to innovate as responsible researchers and as responsible educators and students and administrators and so forth and so on. All right, so I think with that, I come to the end of my session. I thank you for your kind attention. I thank Niket Madam for the kind invite, and I also thank the B.S. Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology for sharing this warm invitation. And then I end on a very positive note. Let's foster creativity and innovation. And now at this point, I'm open to questions. We have a few minutes left. So please share your questions, and then I'll be happy to address those. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Participants can unmute themselves and ask questions. We still have 5 minutes. Participants are requested to unmute and ask the question, or you can drop the questions in the chat box. I will read out for you.
Sir.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working as an associate professor in Engineering College, Chennai.
Okay.
I find though a lot of initiative have been taken by the institute for innovations and all those stuffs, but still, we're struggling to get things done, and there is some lacking in the innovations, creating new ideas. That's become so difficult for us when compared to maybe you have visited across the globe. So, what to make us to little difficult to make it such kind of innovations compared to the developed countries? And is it naturally we are in a disadvantage, or we can make it up, or our education system not really creating a lot of kind of innovations here? And what do you think is the problem here?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting and relevant question. I tend to agree with that. Actually, many places I visit, this is a scenario that I see at many places. I see one reason, one primary reason behind that is that a change in mindset might be required probably from the student side, and a change of mindset could also be required from the educator side. Now, I know as educators, we strive very hard to ensure that our students get all the things they require. But I'll tell you, for some of the things that act as hurdles, which I listed in my presentation, there are ways of overcoming them. But the very first thing that we need to overcome is that students should be told that merely studying for the exam, getting good grades, and finishing their projects is not sufficient. In order to sustain in the corporate world or in the outside world, they have to be innovators, because let's say today they pass their engineering exam.
नहीं सर का कनेक्शन चले गया.
Exams with distinction, that does not mean that they will be top class innovators. I can give countless examples of people in some industry, but they are not really doing any fantastic innovations. Whereas I can also give some other examples of people who have graduated with an engineering degree from a very ordinary looking engineering college, but yet they, because they have this innovative mindset, they have really transformed themselves into fantastic innovators. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is, as educators, we have to try our level best to ensure that our students change the mindset. And of course, that's not the only thing. That's not the only parameter that needs to be tweaked. There are several other parameters. Some of them are within our control. Some of them are not within our control. But we have to try our best to ensure that we get them the right resources, we get the funding, we get the conducive environment, but most importantly, we change their mindset. And these are all the techniques and the methods using which we can bring in that change. And people who resist change can never innovate. So that's one key message that needs to be conveyed to students, that resistance to change really does not help. So if we try adopting a holistic approach by identifying all the hurdles, so this is a concrete solution that I would like to propose. As educators, we can make a list of all the hurdles that are serving as impediments, and then we can try our best to solve each of those. Is it counseling? Does the student require help from an ombudsman? Does the student require more mentorship? What is it that is creating a hurdle? We have to really identify all of those, really make a list of those, and try solving the problem based on that. So if we adopt this approach, I'm sure we can at least make a very honest and diligent attempt to bring in a culture of innovation. Although that's not going to happen overnight, but definitely it will be a good starting point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Zio sir. Shazia madam, you have raised the hand. Do you
Yes,
have any
ma'am.
question now?
Yes, ma'am. Hello, sir. Sir, I have
Go
only
ahead.
one doubt, sir, regarding patent. So, because what happened when we file a patent application, so that has to be published, because then after that it will be open for public scrutiny. So, but according to your presentation, it's like patent and publication. So, kindly correct me if these two are the different thing, because ultimately patent has to be published. So kindly clarify, sir, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so let me quickly clarify that. Now, when I said patents versus publications, what I was trying to say is, I was trying to distinguish between an idea that is patentable and for which you file a patent versus an idea that is published in a journal. And what you're saying is the publishing of a patent. So let me distinguish between the two. So basically, let's say I'm an innovator, I invent something. So let's say I discover a new compound, an organic compound that kills cancer cells. So it is up to me. Do I want to publish it in a journal? Yes. Then that is a journal publication. But do I want to patent it? Yes. Then that becomes a patent publication. So there is a difference between journal publication and patent publication. Journal, although both of them are publications, but journal publication, we publish it in a journal. It is open for people to see, and people can develop that. They can do whatever they want with it, and that's how the field progresses. So that journal publication is equally important. But if you are, let's say, working in an industry, in a pharmaceutical industry, and you don't want any creepy company from China or any other place to copy your process and then make cheap imitations of your pharmaceutical drug, and then you have to patent it. So that if you patent that and then the Indian Patent Office publishes that, then that's a patent publication. What a patent publication does is it grants you immunity against IPR violations. So if somebody violates your intellectual property right, you can file a case against that person. Whereas journal publication, it is open to public, and then people can develop their own ideas and their own methods based on that. Both are equally important, but that's essentially the difference between a journal publication and a patent publication.
Okay, sir. That means the word publication you mentioned in your slide, that is related to journal publications. So that's why I confused. So journal publication, that means what we do research and publish in any paper.
Yes. So I was trying to distinguish between patent publication and journal publication.
Yeah. Okay. Got it, sir.
Right.
Any other questions? Okay. Nikhil sir will be back again at 2 o'clock today. So if you have any other question related to this session also, you can put up those questions. Nikhil sir, I think that will be good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have any other questions, I can answer them even during the afternoon session. And if you want, we can start the afternoon session by answering some of your questions. That is also okay with me.
Okay, sir. Then we will end this session. Nikhil sir, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and giving us such a wonderful lecture, sir. We'll see you back again at 2 o'clock sharp.
Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you have to unshare your screen, sir.
Okay. Let me